The readings in Ezekiel are basically what I hope to use as a springboard, especially when we read that letter in Corinthians where Paul speaks of the difficulties that they were all experiencing, which he too was experiencing, in prison, in stripes, in labors, in sleeplessness. I mean, we're all having our difficulties during this crisis. I know that there are a number of brethren who are not being able to work. Brethren and sisters aren't able to work. And we're facing a whole range of things. However, think of Ezekiel. Now, I know I normally ask people to answer, but we're all on mute, I suppose. The question is, where was Ezekiel when he wrote his prophecy? Now, I've got here up a table of things that I hope to deal with. There's Ezekiel's timeline, so we'll see where Ezekiel lived, what time he lived, what he was going through, a couple of other things. And then we're going to have a look at the Garden of Eden, the flaming sword, the glory in Ezekiel chapter 1, the wheels within wheels, chapter 10. And then we'll look at the mercy seat, the mouldings around the mercy seat, Moses at the burning bush, the lampstand, the glory at Mount Sinai, God handing Moses the tables of stone written with his finger, then the glory as it entered into the tabernacle, then the glory as God showed his glory to Moses. And then we're going to look at what God describes himself as in Deuteronomy as they're about to cross over the River Jordan. And then we'll have a little bit of a look, do a backflip at Aaron's rod that budded. We'll have a look at when the glory entered Solomon's temple. And then we're going to have a look, hopefully we'll get there, a very short little event that took place in Hezekiah's day that was so momentous that the astrologers from Babylon came to see Hezekiah to talk about the miracle that was done in the land with the glory of God. Very interesting one. And then we're going to have a look at how that the sundial in Ahaz went back as 10 degrees backwards in Hezekiah's day to show that God would save him from his death and give him an extension of 15 years' life. And it all had to do with the glory of God. Then we're going to have a look at, we're going to then go over to 2 Corinthians 6, the one that we read today, where Paul exhorts them with this thought in verse 16 of 2 Corinthians 6, I will dwell in them and walk among them. Where's that taking you to? I will dwell in them and I will walk among them. Very interesting, because Jesus quotes that in Revelation as well. Then we're going to have just a very quick look at the Transfiguration. The message of the Transfiguration was, I believe, Moses and Elijah and their conversation. Their conversation was about what? Their conversation was about Jesus's exodus coming out of Egypt. Anyhow, we'll then go on and we'll have a look at what Paul does in Hebrews chapter 12 when he quotes Deuteronomy 9 verse 3 to 10 to prove that Deuteronomy 9 verse 3 and 10 is actually talking of something that happens through every age, even in our age today. Then we'll have a look at Revelation chapter 1 verse 12 to 16. We'll all know that one, I'm sure, where the Son of Man, where Jesus walks in the midst of the golden lampstands. Now, that's sort of the picture that we presented with, but there is one comment, and a very important comment, that comes in that particular chapter in Revelation 1, and it says, and the vision was like the sun in its strength. That was the glory of God. We'll then go on a little bit further. We're going to have a look at Revelation 11 verse 15 and 19, Revelation 11 verse 15 and 19 is interesting because it says the Son of Man walks into the most holy place and the ark of God was seen. It was opened. In the book of Revelation, the ark of the covenant is still there. And then we're going to just backtrack and we're going to have a look at what David says in Psalm 19 verse 6, where he says, the heavens declare the glory of God. And then we're going to go to 2 Corinthians chapter 3 to close off. Absolutely beautiful verse, those verses 2 to 3. So let's just look at where Ezekiel was. Ezekiel, I've got a bit of a Excel spreadsheet timeline. I hope everybody can see it. The fall of Jerusalem and Ezekiel's time. I've got here in 1 Kings chapter 6, it tells us that it was 480 years from the children of Israel coming up to the building of Solomon's temple. 480 years. Now that was, as you will see on this bottom right-hand side of the diagram, that was in 957 BC. Well, Nebuchadnezzar came and he encamped around Jerusalem for 3 years, and then he took them all captive and he burned down the temple, and he took all the furniture in Jeremiah 52 verse 14 to 23. He took the furniture and he took all of the basins, the spoons, the cups, everything he took to Babylon. And that was the fall of Jerusalem in about 587 BC. The temple was standing for approximately 370 years. Can anybody remember what Ezekiel was? He opens up his chapter and he tells us that Ezekiel was a priest. Now, if Ezekiel was a priest, what would he do? He would go into the temple year after year during his time, his appointed times. The temple stood for 370. For 370 years, the glory of God, and we'll read about it when we get to Chronicles, entered into the temple. It was a visible manifestation. It was such a visible manifestation that the people fell on their faces for the absolute incredible thing that happened. Now, if you try and look at what happened when such an incredible event occurred, I mean, it makes the comment people fell on their faces. I'm sure that most of us have seen what happened when those aeroplanes flew into the Twin Towers in September 11 in America. People just were absolutely astounded. They couldn't believe their eyes. And the videos that you've seen of it just show you what the people did as they passed by. I mean, that was just an aeroplane flying into the tower. In 2 Chronicles, when we read of the Solomon's temple after he had made the prayer, the glory of God came as a physical manifestation. So much so that the people fell on their faces. Now, that not only happened in 2 Chronicles, it also happened when the tabernacle was inaugurated in Leviticus chapter 9. We'll have a quick look at that. Now, just to tell you a bit more about this diagram. If we look at this diagram, we have the history of the last kings of Israel: Josiah, Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, pardon me, and Zedekiah. Jehoiachin was the king who was only there for a very short period of time. But if you follow this little line down, you'll see I've got recorded here the king of Babylon's reign. It was in the 8th year of the king of Babylon that Ezekiel was taken captive. And you got also here Jehoiakim's captivity. It was the 5th year, between the 5th and the 6th year of Jehoiakim's captivity, Jehoiachin's captivity. Now, I've also got recorded all of Ezekiel's prophecies. and his visions. The first one, from chapter 1 to 7, happened in the 5th, 6th year of their captivity, or in the 13th year of the king of Babylon. Then the next one was Ezekiel 8 to 9, was in the 7th year. 20 to 23 was in the later on, the 7th, 8th year. 24 was in the 9th year. 26 to 31 was in the 11th year. And 32 to 48 was the year that Nebuchadnezzar captured and burnt the temple. Now, Ezekiel was a priest. What happened every year on the Day of Atonement? The high priest went into the most holy place. And when he went into the most holy place, what would he see if he was in the most holy place? Now, Ezekiel wasn't a high priest, but he was one of the priests. And he would have wanted to know what's inside the most holy place, because nobody else went in there. And of course, in Chronicles, and we'll look at that, the glory of God had entered in there. Here he was in captivity. Where was he in captivity? He was in captivity in what today we would call Iraq, or on the border of Iran. Ezekiel was far away from home. You know, when we read that Psalm 137 where it says, you know, will you sing me one of the songs of Babylon? I'm sure we all know that song that they sing, you know, by the rivers of Babylon. Sing me one of the songs of Zion. They got together at the river to actually go and remember the very thing that we are doing today. We come together to remember what? To remember the glory of God, the power of God, the influence of God in our lives. And it says this in Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 1, it came to pass in the 13th year on the 4th month of the 5th day of the month that I was amongst the captives at the river Chebar, and the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. Now we all, I'm sure, have, oops, wrong one. I'm sure we've all looked at Ezekiel chapter 1 and chapter 10, or chapter 1 to chapter 10 very often. And this is probably the closest representation that I got of that vision. I want you to just look at Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 28. He sees the whole vision of the cherubim, the wheels, the one on the throne above the wheels. And then he says this in verse 27 for connection. He says, also the appearance from his waist and upwards I saw was like the color of amber. So from the waist and upwards of the one sitting on the throne was like the color of amber, with the appearance of fire all around, as we can see there in the picture. And he says, and it was the appearance, and downwards I saw as it were the appearance of fire for brightness. So from his waist down was the appearance of fire. And then he says, verse 28, and like the appearance of a rainbow in the cloud. There was a rainbow in the cloud. So here's someone on the throne. There's a rainbow in the cloud. And it was like the appearance of the brightness all around. It was as the likeness of the glory of the Lord. It was an incredible vision that he saw down by the river Chebar, where the captives had all gathered together to talk about the things as we do today. Now, I just want to take you back to the previous slide, if I can. There. Oops, there. There's a picture of the Garden of Eden. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 24, it says that God placed at the Garden of Eden cherubim to protect the way to the tree of life. Now, this is some person who has put together a picture of what he thought it was. Certainly the cherubim cherubim had the wings, they had the four faces, and it says there was a flaming sword. Everybody thinks that that was actually a protection to stop people from going into the garden. It's not what Genesis 3 verse 24 says. It says it was there to protect the way to the tree of life. There was even the glory in Genesis. Now here is another representation of the picture in Ezekiel chapter 1. It's probably a more accurate picture, but not with any of the fire and the colouring. You can see somebody sitting on the throne. You can see the cherubim with their wings. You can see the cherubim with their four faces. And notice that in Ezekiel, it says they had the face of the lion on the left, the man and the ox, and also the face of an eagle, which was obviously on the back. And it says they had hands under their wings, and with their four wings, they touched each other. And there were wheels within wheels beside them. I don't think this representation is actually the right one. I think the next representation is more accurate. Here were wheels within wheels. And it says that the cherubim didn't move. They didn't change direction as they moved. They went in one direction, then they went in another direction, and the wheels were full of eyes. Now, what are eyes about? Eyes are incredible things, you know. I mean, when you think about it, the eye can see all the wavelengths of the spectrum of the rainbow. And of course, the eyes speak of God's eyes. God is able to see. He goes up and down in the earth, beholding whatever needs to be seen. The eyes of God are always there. Well, let's go a little bit further. We go back before that vision all happened to Moses at the burning bush. He saw a burning bush that wasn't consumed. Now, I always like to look at this burning bush and I say, well, there you are. You know, we should celebrate Christmas, because in Christmas you have a Christmas tree, and you normally put lights on the Christmas tree. Why do they do that? To imitate what Moses saw, a tree that was burning. That's just my South African humour, I suppose. But think of this. Here was a tree, and it was not consumed, yet it was on fire. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that that is what the lampstand in the holy place represented, because we are told in Exodus chapter 25, verse 31 to 40, that they had to make the lampstand of one central branch and 3 branches coming out of it on each side. And the branches had to have a knop, a flower, and a bowl. Now, when you go and have a look at those in the original Hebrew, they represent the progress of an almond tree as it grows. The bowl represents the beginning of the knop or the almond seed. Then you get the almond seed, and then you get the flower that bursts into fruit. And in Exodus 27 verse 20 it says that these had to be made like an almond. This is a tree on fire. And when you go to Exodus, I think it's 25, verse 37, the 7 lamps had to give fire, and they had to give light. And the priests had to tend to it every morning and every evening. Now remember, this was an almond tree. The other thing we've got to remember is that there was a time in Exodus 31 when Moses went up into the mountain, when he was given the 10 commandments that were written by the finger of God. You just imagine what that would have been for Moses to see that actually happening. And of course, Moses had to prepare the second set of tables. Where did those tables go, brethren and sisters? Those tables went into the Ark of the Covenant. And where was the Ark of the Covenant? The Ark of the Covenant was in the most holy place, just below the mercy seat. And in Exodus 25 we read, God says concerning the mercy seat, he says, there will I meet with you. There will I commune with you from between the cherubim in the most holy place. Well, let's go to Leviticus chapter 9, verse 11. That's an important one for us to look at, because in Leviticus chapter 9, they had just set up, Moses and Aaron had set up the tabernacle. The tabernacle was ready to be inaugurated. They had put all the offerings on the altar. And it says this in verse 22. We'll read Leviticus chapter 9. We'll read from verse, say, 19. The fat from the bull and the ram, the fatty tail that covers the entrails, the kidneys, the fatty lobe attached to the liver, they put the fat on top of the breast. Then he burned the fat on the altar, and the breast and the right thigh Aaron waved, and the wave offering before the Lord as Moses had commanded. Then Aaron lifted up his hands towards the people and blessed them, and came down from offering the sin offering and the burnt offering and the peace offering. Now, it says that he had come down from offering them. He'd actually placed them on the altar. And it says this, and Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle of meeting, and then they came out and blessed the people. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to all of the people, and fire came down from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat that was on the altar. And when the people saw it, they fell on their faces. That is an absolutely understatement of the event that happened when they saw this glory entering into the tabernacle, and a bolt of fire came out of the tabernacle as Moses and Aaron came out, and it lit up the fire and burnt the offering. You see, the manifestation of the glory in the days of the children of Israel was a very real thing. It wasn't just a vision, but what Ezekiel saw in Ezekiel chapter 1 was a vision. Why was it a vision? It was a vision because it was important to him. As a priest, he knew all about this. Now, right inside the tabernacle, there was the Ark of the Covenant with the mercy seat and the wings of the cherubim with their faces looking down, and there was the Shekinah glory in the midst of the wings of the cherubim. But inside, hidden from view, was a golden pot of manna. Why a golden pot of manna? A golden pot of manna. The manna wasn't the manna that they had disappeared every day, excepting, of course, on the sixth day. But the golden pot of manna that was there for so long didn't deteriorate. This was immortal food. This was food for the children of Israel to consume in the presence of God. And there was the 2 tables of stone that had the summary of the 10 commandments written on them. And then there was, most importantly of all, Aaron's rod. And of course, we always read that budded. Now, of course, this comes after the insurrection by 250 leaders who said that Moses and Aaron take on too much on themselves, and they all had to prepare for themselves a stick. And Aaron prepared himself a stick, and they came and they put it in front of the tabernacle, or inside the tabernacle. And in the morning, Aaron's rod that was dead the night before came alive. It got leaves, it got blossoms, and it got fruit, and it got seed. There were almonds, life from death. You see, the Ark of the Covenant was an incredible thing. And when you take a look at these, the crowns round about the top of the Ark of the Covenant, this is actually a throne, the throne of God. And just about these crowns, it's something interesting. When we come to the book of Revelation, to chapter 4, we'll find out that the 24 elders that sat around the throne of God in Revelation chapter 4, they all wore crowns. You see, the Ark of the Covenant spoke about more than just a box that held all of this furniture. It was a message. It was the message that we want to hear today. It's the message that we want to hear every day. Now, when Moses went up into the mountain, it says this concerning the sight that they saw. When God came down in Exodus chapter 20, it says that that mountain was on fire for how long? Exodus 24, verse 16 to 18. Mount Sinai was on fire for 7 days. There was no volcano. There was no ash. There was no lava. And the people saw it. And here you can see the artist representation of all the people standing there. No wonder they said, Moses, don't let God talk to us. The sight must have been absolutely unbelievable. Now, I would like you to have a look at this in Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 30. Deuteronomy chapter 9 is a very, very important chapter, or the whole of Deuteronomy. I don't know if you know where the book of Deuteronomy was written. The book of Deuteronomy was written at the River Jordan just before they crossed over the River Jordan to go in and take the land. But there's something else that's even more important about it. And that's if you go to Deuteronomy chapter 31. Deuteronomy 31 verse 24. And it says this. So it was when Moses had completed writing the words of the law in a book, of course it was a scroll, when they were finished, Moses commanded the Levites who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord and said, take this book of the law and put it somewhere. And where did he put it? He put it beside the ark of the covenant, that it may be a witness against you. The book of the law was put into the most holy place beside the Ark of the Covenant. But come back to Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 30. The children of Israel, of course, had got here once before. I think it's, did I say verse 30? I think it might be verse 13. No, it's verse 3. Deuteronomy 9, verse 3. You see, they'd been here before. And what was the report? That the spies who went into the land, excepting, of course, Joshua and Caleb, what was the report that they gave? They said that the people are too big. They are the Anakims. The land, we can't take the land. They even voted in a leader to lead them back to Egypt. That's how afraid they were of going into the land. Now Moses says to them, God says to them in Deuteronomy, reading from verse 1 of chapter 9, Hear, O Israel, you are to cross over Jordan today to go in and dispossess the nations greater and mightier than yourself, cities greater and fortified up to heaven, to a people dreadful and tall, descendants of the Anakims, whom you know and whom you heard said, who can stand before the descendants of Anak? Therefore understand today that the Lord your God is he who goes before you as a consuming fire. And Paul quotes that in Hebrews chapter 12. You know, when we read this verse and he says, I go before you as a consuming fire, it is not to destroy us, but it is to destroy our enemies, whoever they are. Now, you know, we sit here and we actually look over at Lake Conjola, where they had those fires in December 2019, absolutely terrible. The fire was unbelievable. And we go for a walk up to the river over there, and you can still see the trees. The fire was so dense and so terrifying in Lake Conjola. Those trees are still dead. You go up a little bit further and you see the trees have recovered. You can hardly see that they had a fire there. It was an incredible fire. And I don't have to tell you about the fires that are currently in California. They can't put the fires out. If God is like a fire consuming our enemies, if God goes before us as a fire, brethren and sisters, he uses symbols that we can appreciate to show us whatever our problems are, whatever our difficulties are. Yes, the surroundings that we live in might have an effect, but God will go before us like a consuming fire. Well, let's turn to 2 Chronicles 7, because this event of the glory coming down into the temple or into the tabernacle wasn't the only time that it occurred. In 2 Chronicles chapter 7, we read this. It says, when Solomon had finished praying at the dedication of the temple, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offerings and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. And the priests could not enter the house, because the glory of the Lord had filled the temple. And when the children of Israel saw how the fire came down, and the glory of the Lord in the temple, they bowed their faces to the ground and to the pavement and worshipped. And they said, God is good, and his mercy endures forever. It was an incredible sight. Well, there was another event that took place, and this event was in the days of Hezekiah. You know, Hezekiah was told that he was going to die when Sennacherib was at the gate of the city of Jerusalem. And Isaiah was sent in to him. And Isaiah said to him, this is what the Lord said to you. You are going to die. What did Hezekiah do? He didn't say, oh, woe is me. He turned his face to the wall and he prayed to God. And it says there were tears in his eyes. Now, one doesn't just raise tears to your eyes when you get to our age. Something really unbelievable has to happen for tears to come in your eyes. And Hezekiah turned his face to the walls and he cried with tears, and he prayed to God and he said, you who dwell between the cherubim, hear my prayer. Isaiah had not even left the temple courts, and he was turned around and he went to go and say to Hezekiah, this is the sign from the Lord, that the Lord will do the very thing which he has spoken. He said, and the sign will be that the shadow in Ahaz's sundial will go back 10 degrees. Now, what I've done over here is, Margaret assisted me with this, and we put together a set of stairs that somebody has gone and who's done an investigation into the sundial of Ahaz, and they pointed out that there was a set of stairs from the court of the king into the temple precincts, and there was a series of steps, and we know how the shadows go down and come up and down and come up, and so the sundial of Ahaz was actually a series of steps. And when you go into the book of Psalms and you read the Songs of Degrees, you'll actually see they're called steps. Now, we've got a representation here of what happened because, you know, the Babylonians sent an emissary to Hezekiah, and you can read of that in 2 Chronicles 24. You can read of how they sent an emissary to look and to find out what the miracle was that was done in the land. The sundial would go back in 10 degrees. Now, we know that that's a physical impossibility for a sundial to go back. And some people have suggested that the earth would have had to be moved by God on its axis to get the sundial to go back. But we don't believe that that's the case, because Hezekiah's prayer, he says, "Thou who dwells between the cherubim, give me a sign." We believe that what happened is that the glory of God came out of the temple, and because it was a light brighter than the sunshine, it could cause the shadow to go backwards. Now, I'll show you how this happens, and if you listen, you'll hear what Margaret has to say.
The only way a shadow can move backwards is if a light brighter than the existing light moves out, and it then causes the existing shadow, and you can see the second light coming, it causes the existing shadow to move backwards.
And that's what we believe happened, brethren and sisters. You can just imagine what the people would have done in Hezekiah's day, what Sennacherib would have done when they saw this incredible bright light, and it caused the sundial in Ahaz's sundial to move backwards. Now, let's move forward to the book of Revelation, chapter 1. Here we've got a picture that I've made of the vision that John saw. He saw one walking in the midst of 7 golden candlesticks. Now, when you went to the temple had 10 candlesticks. The tabernacle had 1 candlestick. But in Revelation chapter 1, verse 12 to 16, we read that there were 7 candlesticks. If someone is walking in the midst of candlesticks, he's in the holy place. And a very interesting thing about this in the book of Revelation chapter 1 verse 26 is you read these candlesticks speak of people. They speak of believers. And what are the believers? Ephesus, Smyrna, Thyatira, Laodicea. Each one of these are ecclesias. What sort of ecclesias are they? Oh, they're Gentile ecclesias. Gentile ecclesias in the holy place. You see, what he was saying is this, is that even Gentiles will come into the tabernacle or the temple of God. And when you go and you have a look in 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 13 and in Numbers chapter 35 verse 34, God says, the quote in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, I, the Lord, dwell amongst the children of Israel. And in Kings, when the temple was inaugurated, God says, and I will dwell amongst the children of Israel. Incredible. The message of the tabernacle, the message of the children of Israel is exactly the same message as it is for us today, brethren and sisters, where the glory of God is something that God displays to us. And you know, if you went to, we're not going to speak today on the Transfiguration, but if you went to the Transfiguration, you'll find out that it says this, when Jesus was transfigured before Moses and Elijah, they spoke about his exodus that was about to come at Jerusalem. This is my beloved Son. Sorry about that. Now, just look at this. This is my beloved Son, he said. This is my beloved Son, who I have called out of Egypt. Furthermore, it says he spoke about his exodus. It's almost as if Jesus was being told, or if Simon, John, and Peter were being told, go and have a look at what happened in Exodus. The glory of God came, and it was like a consuming fire in front of us. You know, the scribes and the Pharisees tried to put Jesus to death. 3 days later, they were not just proved wrong. It was like a burning fire going before us. Well, let's get to Revelation chapter 11, verse 15 to 19. To me, this is one of the most beautiful chapters in the book. It's the 7th trumpet. And of course, we know what the trumpets were about. The trumpets in Numbers chapter 11 Numbers chapter 10, were to give a command that came from God as to what to do. And here we find in verse 15, and the seventh angel sounded its trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever. And then it says this, and the 24 elders who were before the throne of God fell on their faces and worshipped him. And they all had crowns on their heads. You see, the Ark of the Covenant was a prophecy of those people who are going to come into the kingdom, who are going to be assembled around the throne of God, where the glory of God will be between the cherubim. What was the glory of God? When Moses went up into the mount, he was shown the glory of God. What was he shown? I know you can't answer, so I'll answer for you. The Lord, gracious and merciful and forgiving, and it was the character of God. He was not shown this bright light in Exodus chapter 33. He was shown the character of God. That's what the glory represented. Now go on a little bit further in this seventh trumpet, and it says this. This is the song, first of all, that they sing in verse 17 to 18. We give thanks, O Lord, the one who was and is to come, because you have taken your great power and reigned. And then in verse 19 it says this, and then the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the Ark of the Covenant was seen. Now that word seen there is not just the word, yes, I looked and yep. That word seen is like the word in the last book of Job, where Job says, I have spoken too much, and I have knowledge that I didn't understand, but now my eye seeth you. We say it ourselves, brethren and sisters. We look at the scriptures sometimes, and all of a sudden we see something that's absolutely beautiful. And what do we say? Now I see it. It doesn't mean that we've just looked at it with our eyes. It means that it has meant something to us. It has changed us. It was like when Hezekiah turned his face to the wall, and God heard his prayer, and the glory came out and gave him a sign that he would be healed. He was resurrected in symbol. Here's the picture that I've tried to represent, where the Son of Man comes in and the Ark of the Covenant was opened. The one sitting on the throne, the lion, the ox, the eagle, and the man, the 24 elders sitting around the throne. What a beautiful thought. In symbol, the Ark of the Covenant. It had all of the symbols that God wants in our heart. He wants our word. He wants his word in our heart. He wants us for resurrection. He wants to feed us with the bread of God. Well, we say we may not see the Lord, the glory of God. I'd like you to consider Psalm 19, verse 1 to 6, where the psalmist, remember, he was a shepherd. Now, a lot of us don't get up too early. In our older age, we're always up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. And we are very fortunate to be able to live right on the edge of the water, and we can see in the morning. And here on this side is a photograph that I took about a month ago of the sunrise. Absolutely incredible. For those people who know the area, you can actually see, if you look carefully, there's Point Perpendicular at Sussex Inlet. Here's the sea at Mollymook. Here are the clouds. There's the glory of God coming up every morning. This is what David saw. The heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech. You can't hear a word of this, brethren and sisters. But every day we see the glory of God, a testimony to his character, who rises to shine in our hearts. And then he says this, there is no speech, there is no language, the voice is not heard, but yet their line went out throughout the earth to the ends of the world. And in them he has set a tabernacle for the sun, which is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, rejoices like a strong man to run a race. What a beautiful thought, the psalmist said. He said that every morning we see the glory of God arising. We see what the children of Israel saw when it entered the tabernacle. You know, Revelation 21 verse 2 represents it as a square golden image with pearls and 12 gates with the names of the tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles. But what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 3 verse 16 to 7 is this: don't you know that you are the temple of God and the Spirit of God dwells in you? If anyone defiles the temple of God, will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. And so we read in Revelation chapter 5 verse 11 to 14, we read, then I looked and I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, the living creatures, the 24 elders, the numbers of them were 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom, and strength and honour and glory and blessing. And every creature which is in heaven, I need to go one back. There we are. Every creature which is in heaven and earth and under the earth, those that are in the sea, I heard them saying, blessing and honour and glory and power be to him that sits on the throne and to the Lamb forever. And the 4 living creatures said, that's the cherubim, Amen. And the 24 elders fell down and worshipped him. And so we can see where Paul says in 2 Corinthians 3 verse 2 to chapter 3 verse 2 to 3, you are the epistle written in our hearts. Where? By the finger of God, known and read by all men. Clearly, you are the epistle of Christ, ministered by us, written not in ink, but in the Spirit of the living God, not on tables of stone, but on tables of flesh, that is, of the heart. And so in chapter 22 he says, and there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him, and they shall see him face to face, and his name shall be on their forehead. What does it mean to have God's name in our forehead, brethren and sisters? It's not a real name. It's the name that comes out of Numbers chapter 6, the Nazarite, and we know it well. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you. Where will that happen, brethren and sisters? When we go into the presence of God, into the most holy place. He will be gracious unto you. He was enthroned on the mercy seat. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So, verse 27, shall they put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. When God's name is written on us, brethren and sisters, we become Nazarites. Who could be a Nazarite? Anybody. Man, woman, anybody who wanted to give themselves to God. For how long? Forever. And so we come today to remember the one who has called us to be Nazarites, to have his name written on our forehead, to behold his glory, to have the epistle of God written not on tables of stones, but on the tables of our heart. Thank you, Michael.